Hello and welcome back to the channel and another episode in our complete course-ish construction series. Now in this one we're going to look at, as discussed, 5, 6 and 7. I reckon for this episode is mainly going to be ideas. So I'm going to start by looking at 7. I feel like 6 will build itself. It's on a really good piece of land and it just needs pretty bunkering and a tricky green. 7, the plan is to cut the corner a little bit. Now you'll notice we have the barranca running down and that kind of feeds its way into here. So I wonder whether we can use that a little bit as well to kind of encourage people to go even further right and take on more of the cliff. As you can see, it's kind of coming through here. So if that became a higher rise and then dipping back down, that would encourage people to go this way and therefore not be kicked back into an awkward sort of lie. So we're going to mess with that. Main thing I'm going to do is flatten out this part, just generally tidy up the coastline first. We're going to lose this bit, lose some of this as well, and try to work out what we can do with the green too. I think 5 I'm pretty much set on, and it has most of the land it needs. 7 is the one where it needs a little bit working with. So I'm going to go to a time lapse and you can watch some of the ideas. Enjoy. Okay, so that about finishes up with some of the ideas for 7. And you'll have seen a couple of things. I was getting thrown by the fairway being there, so that's all changed to heavy rough. As you can see, the spine's still there. I just can't see any of it, and that allows me to see the natural land a little bit better. The thing that I was finding tricky was this green right on top of the cliffside, and I still kind of like that. I'm not totally sure I'm going away from that. Um, but it wasn't quite coming to me there and then. So what I did was looked at, well, can we facilitate a ground game approach, and lowering that did I really like that. There's the options of you could hit over here for a layup, and then you've got a pretty easy pitch. Now I was planning on having a spine through the green. It generally runs this way, but like kind of runs away towards the back, which you can see it's doing, kind of runs away towards the front as well. So that kind of front half pins, back half pins would really require an accurate control of distance rather than just get somewhere on the green. And obviously you'd have that possibility of laying up here, and that's a fun approach shot. The problem I've got with this, I think it's a good whole idea. Problem is, this one's a running ground game shot, and I think that works really nicely. So you don't want to pull the same trick twice. Equally, 18 is very much a running ground game approach shot as to whether you go here or if you go all the way up here. I haven't quite fleshed this one out, but this is the one where I want to save my best approach shot till last. So therefore, I kind of feel that whilst it would be different, it would be off a fade lie rather than a draw lie. It wouldn't be playing out at the ocean, it would be playing across the cove. It feels a little similar. And I don't really want all, especially when I'm going to have 15 kind of doing the same sort of thing. And then we've already discussed that 2 kind of has a similar sort of shot value. I don't really feel I can go this route, however much I like the hole and however much I feel it integrates really nicely with 7. So I feel it's got to be an aerial approach. I've started looking at this little green site down here again. Now, that one would very much be all carry. Again, is that too similar a green site to 18? I guess that's my next dilemma. Of just like, this one's nestled closely into here. I still feel, whilst I didn't love the original idea, I still feel a green perched high, where it is all aerial approach, maybe even surrounded by bunkers. I feel like that's probably the option that I should be going with for the good of shot variety. But it's going to be one I consider again and again, because I just love this sort of approach shot where you feed a ball in from here and get it onto it requires a lot of control. And when you chuck in a cambered approach, it really requires a lot of like precision, especially when you're going wind and elevation. But I think I just have to do something different. I do quite like the small green idea for par 5, although we do have a relatively small green on 11. It is quite accessible in how it's going to roll the ball on if you hit the right shot. It's not exactly funneling the ball away. So I'm feeling like the play has to be a relatively small raised green that is just asking you to hit an iron dead at it. Now that might still be this site. I think it probably will be. I just need to think about what this land is doing and how it's getting there, and whether this bit of land probably needs to come down a little bit. Maybe this bit goes up a touch, but actually I don't think it works too badly with... I always felt it looked a bit high originally, which is why it came down in the first place. Okay, coming back to this about 10 minutes later, and this is why we go through multiple drafts of holes, because that previous idea, whilst nice, just wasn't working, and I was struggling to find something that was harmonious with the cliffs and being high, and I think I just needed to buy into the dips and troughs and swales a little bit more. The other issue I was having was with the tee shot. So what I've done, shorten the tee shot, so it's now just a straight cape carry, but as much as you can chew. Now that on its own, I wouldn't normally deem as that interesting a tee shot, because, well, you can just play out here and what have you really lost? But when that starts becoming, you need to be as close to the green as possible, such as with a green that's looking like this, where you really need a lot of precision, suddenly I think that becomes really interesting. Now, the green that I found, I haven't really done very much. I think I lowered the green sight by about 3 feet, maybe. And I've dropped this rise and I've dropped it down here a little bit more. And just, I knew that I needed the concept of you fly it all the way and it's not a running approach. Like, it has to do something different. So this becomes kind of a shelf-like green with a big false front. It does also have some really interesting contours that with the shape I think work really nicely. So you've got this feeder slope that could run a ball back here. It's pretty hard back to front, which is nice. Again, for distance control, we're asking people to land just over here and not go too long. You've got the option of this little spine that kind of is potentially funneling down to a little bowl. So imagine if you've got a pin here, well, we could be asking people if we shorten it enough so that they can take it on to about here. Well, if you've got an iron in, you might well be tempted to take that and try to land it on there. As long as I can check that it's doable, I think this is the seed of the idea that we need. Now, as for bunkering, I'm going to put one down here, and it will be pretty low. And the idea is that it's only really to gather balls that are hitting this or short here, and they funnel all the way down, and it's going to be extremely penal. But it's better, I think, than landing here and running off the cliff. I think that's a little too harsh. This is a nice halfway house. This bunker is really kind of to justify the green shape, but also if you bail out too far off the tee, then suddenly you're coming in over that a little bit more rather than opening up a little bit more of an angle such that it is. This one's not really so much about an angle, which again I think meshes pretty well with cape shots, where it's really, if you tighten the dog leg enough, it becomes less about the angle and more about the distance. Because if you think about it, wherever I'm hitting to here or to here, I'm still rolling through the fairway. Like, I'm never actually going to be ending up about here unless I hit an absolutely perfect shot. So the right side of this fairway, it's not impossible, but it's pretty unlikely. Now, we could be getting people playing all the way out here, which is a different angle to kind of here, but it's less common. When we suddenly factor in the fact that we can play with distance, well, then it gets interesting, because now I can put much more pressure on the accuracy of that approach shot in terms of depth. And I can also start thinking about the layup options and where you might go. And if we put a bunker here, well, that then runs down to here. So can you lay it just over this bunker to about here? And then do you really want a flop shot over that false front to whichever pin? Or do you want to be laying back to a full wedge? If you want to be laying back to a full wedge, you've got a flatter plateau around about here, or it dips off massively down this way. Or do you want to be laying back to here, in which case that's pitching wedge? Fine. If you want to take that, be my guest. Because in order to have done that, you would have played driver and then a sand wedge. It feels unlikely. So I think this one's really about baiting people into going for a shot that is going to be challenging and really making them think about, if they are laying up, where are they laying up? And that for me is different to any other hole on the course, either of the par fives. It means I save that kind of cliffside amphitheatre green site for 18. It means I'm not doing the running shot on 11. It means I'm not doing the swale thing I'm going to be doing on 15. That's why it needed to be something different. And that's why it's really important to go through these ideas multiple different times. Now, I typically will go through, some holes come out perfectly first time and you know it's the idea. Often currently I blow up holes based on measure tools and sculpting before actually laying down the surfacing. Usually by the time it comes to laying down the surfacing, I'm pretty set. But it's not uncommon for me to go through on a contest course like 5, 6 different ideas, and it might be as subtle as changing the green sites, looking at the angle off the tee, shortening the hole, changing the par, might be as extreme as that. It might be a complete reroute sometimes. Like, I did contemplate, what if you went up this way and put a green just over the shoulder there? That would certainly be different, but I went away from it because why are you not using this green site? Okay, so to finish up, I thought I'd show you where we've gotten to with 7. It's undergone a couple of further renovations to where it was. I didn't love the proximity to the 6th green of this tee, and I kind of felt there was just too much space between the coast and here, so we've moved it in just a little bit. Again, I view that more as kind of refining the plot rather than cheating. Most of the coastline was about here anyway. It was just a bit too black and white with the carry, and I think it works quite nicely now. So it's therefore a shorter hole, which I quite liked as well, but with more of a kind of diagonal carry, which again I think works better. Before, the tee shot was just, well, you're always hitting the fairway. Now it's got a little bit more to it, and it pinches down a little bit. And I'll play test it for you in a second so that you can see what it looks like. But essentially, the barranca cuts through here, which is why you get the slightly lower part of the fairway. That will still need some work, but I like the concept that you can just play out here for a very easy, flatter lie. Go 3-wood, and then your problems and dilemmas really begin, because none of those layups are particularly attractive. I'd probably play to here, and I might consequently consider widening the fairway just out here a little bit more, just to allow for that. But if you're hitting driver, the aim is to land or end up, basically cut as much of this as you can, because that way you're probably landing on a slightly flatter lie rather than being over here, coming over that bunker with everything pushing you right, which is a pretty scary shot. Smoothed out the green, really didn't need to do much to it. I loved the original contouring. The only thing I really did was shrunk the size of the false front a little bit, as in the size of the green. The green was originally going out around about here, which I felt just looked a little bit too much. I can always extend it again if I need to, but I quite like how it is currently. As is, the main features of the green, it's pretty hard from left to right. Fairly hard front. Well, the top tier, 1 foot of elevation in 11 yards is quite significant. And if you go long, that's a bad miss. But it's quite easy if you take on that false front. It is quite easy to get it to about here. Admittedly, I'm playtesting with beginner tempo, but from there you've got good putts to here. Obviously, to this pin, that's the most gettable. Decent putt up, back up the hill towards this one. To this one, it might be a little bit dicey, but middle of the green's not a bad play. Then the other thing that I did, just as you can see in the background, I started working on 14 as well. So I've started sorting out the coastline a little bit. We lost that potential green site, and this cliff side now makes a bit more sense. One of the things I've always loved about Pebble is the way that you've got the dips and rises in the cliffs. If you think about how 6 works, that's a hole that doesn't exist anywhere else, where you go down and then up and over. And I kind of wanted to get that feel somewhere. So 14 is going to be a bit of a mashup between 8 and 6, in that you can't hit full driver like on 6, but you've got an option of a higher plateau, which leaves you a long approach in to this green. This green is going to feature kind of a false front again, but more an angle. So going out this way gets you the angle to get around that false front, but a longer approach. Going down this way opens the green up away from this bunker, but you're taking on that false front a little bit more. Again, you're also dealing with elevation change and kind of what will be a pretty pronounced green and heavily bunkered. So I like this. I really like the risk of, if you're hitting down, the further you're hitting down the fairway, you get a better reward. But there's the risk of running out of fairway and going into that heavy rough and having that Jordan Spieth on 8 kind of lie, which I think is quite fun. So without further ado, we're going to play test 7. Again, the caveat is we're on beginner clubs. I'm generally going with medium and north as a wind direction. I picked at random that I just want to see how everything plays in this. So first thoughts, I like this little rise here. I think that's going to be very intimidating, of just like you are low on the coastline and hitting up and over. I think is a cool kind of cliffside trick. When we lose these, it will be really nice to be able to see this big winding, not quite a Bay Hill par 5, but it's not far off. So as you can see, where the driver lands, we can go this way. There's going to be a little question as to whether you run out of fairway, but here would be pretty safe. So let's hit that one and see how this goes. So that's the safe tee shot. And as you can see, we've got the most of all hanging lies. So that's our sloping. We've got a 5-wood in. Well, 5-wood's going to be short, so you're looking at 3-wood. You're then factoring in elevation and that stance and wind if you're going for it. And you've got a doable but tight plateau. I think this works much better than any of the other ideas that I had. So we're going to have to aim kind of, I think, over this way. Again, beginner clubs, so tempo is not an issue. But even then, look how far right that has started. And that will trickle over the back. This bit still needs to be sculpted. But have a little look at this kind of recovery shot that we've left ourselves if we do go long. Heavy rough or not, That's challenging, and the plan will be that that funnels down to a collection area of fairway rather than light rough for the most part. It's a shame it grips there, but we can sculpt that so it doesn't. And if you go long, you're going to keep running away a little bit more. So very easy to make a 6 on that hole, I think. But for likelihoods for plat guys, the best, like, they will be making 5s at worst, really. Let's go southwest for this one and see how it plays into the wind, because that's always a challenge. Okay, so here we're probably not going to be able to cover that, so we're just going to play out to the middle of the fairway. It's fine, we're in that low area. I'm interested to see sightline from here. Obviously sculpting still needs some work. I don't love that it's coming back towards us that much, but I've got roll set at lowest possible. Okay, so we can't go for it, I don't think. Did you hit driver off the deck, I wonder? I tell you what, it's doable, but that brings a lot of risk into play. Okay, that's cool. So the fact that that is even an option, let's go a little bit further left. Oh, even on beginner tempo, I still can't do driver off the deck. And obviously we'll play test all of these little areas properly and check that they really do work, and that if you are laying up, you've got that option. There we go. Still gone a little bit further right than I would have anticipated. But it can reach, and I would want that one to stay on the green. So you get an idea of kind of the relative severity of what we're after. Okay, so say we're not going... So it's reachable in a south wind, which is great. If you're not reaching, because that's a risky shot... Oof. Not a massively comforting second. And this is going to run off the fairway because I haven't sculpted any of this yet. So we need to see some work on that, but let's say you even did leave yourself this pitch. That's pretty frightening. Tough, definitely. Cool. So I like how this one plays. So I think this episode in a nutshell shows you the importance of having that big picture view, because if we had done that green side the same as 18, tucked halfway down the cliffside, it would have made 18 feel a bit less as a green site. It needs to be a spectacular one-of-a-kind green site. If we'd gone for that same bounce the ball on approach, well, you've kind of done that. It's asking a similar question to 11. It's asking a similar question to 15, which we're going to play later. It's asking a relatively similar question to 2, and it's going to be hard enough to differentiate those three. So we couldn't do it again. I think have that big picture of what does this hole need to be for the good of the course overall. With this one, the skyline approach was 100%, like you've got to carry it all the way or else you're laying back. That has kind of, getting that approach right has made the tee shot work, because the tee shots suddenly become, you've got to be as far up as you possibly can to have more control. Now, I do still think this area is a little bit empty. We're going to play with planting or bunkers. I'm hoping that just planting this side will kind of cover all of it, because I don't need to or want to clutter anything here. It's just unusual for me to see this much fairway. Could also make it more undulating, but I like how it ties in with 5. I think, to be honest, it probably just needs crowds around here. Planting. Sort the barranca out planting-wise. Crowds down here, which we do have. A little bit of stuff probably in front of this house, although, again, bigger picture, I want to keep this view on 2 as clean as I possibly can do, so we don't want much in the way of trees. And then I've got to work out how I'm framing or what I'm doing with this little area. The other thing that I can't avoid is there's going to be a stark transition between 7 and 8. 7, you go from this coastal cliffside hole, and 8, you're suddenly playing into trees. Like, Pebble does that as well, and there's nothing you can do. They're just 2 very different environments, and unless I'd gone coastal tee shot and then gone up here so that you're playing into the trees, which I think would have lost a really good green site, I don't really see a way around that. And I'm kind of okay with it because you'll have played through the trees on 1, 2, 3, and then you're kind of coming back into them. And what I'll try to do is have them, I guess, maybe a few more scattered around here. If you see it in the background, I guess it probably makes a bit more sense. So that's this one. Probably quite a longer episode with lots of talking, but I hope it gives a really good insight into how I go about remodeling holes from first ideas. And even though those changes may not seem huge, like one by one, they're making it a better golf hole because it's got a real clarity of what it's trying to be. So once you've got that, what does the course need from this golf hole, particularly with the last few, where it's the ones where you don't have as clear cut of an idea? What haven't you done somewhere else? Go with that, make sure that it's testing that shot value, and then it all hopefully comes together. Because now this is one I really like, and I think the set of par fives is going to be really strong. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. See you again soon.